Have you ever looked up at a stormy sky and wondered if the world was trying to tell you something? That's how it felt for me that afternoon in Seattle rain, tapping against my car windows, like tiny reminders that everything can change in a moment. My name is Lauren Bennett. I'm a mom and illustrator, and until that day, someone who believed that with enough hard work and love life would stay on course. But as the clouds grew darker and the wind howled across the sound, I felt the first tremors of a change I never saw coming. It was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday. I'd spent the morning sketching new designs for a children's book, the kind that made Hazel, my 6-year-old daughter, giggle at breakfast. My phone buzzed with a message. I thought it would be my best friend checking in, or Hazel's school reminding me about pickup. Instead, the words on the screen made my heart stumble. I'm leaving. I've transferred everything. Good luck. My husband Ryan was gone, just like that. Our savings, our security, even the stories we'd planned for our little family vanished in a blink. For a moment, the world stood still. I remember staring at that message, not quite believing it was real. Outside, the rain blurred the city into watercolor streaks. Inside, my mind raced with questions. How would I pay rent? How would I explain this to Hazel with her trusting eyes and her love for bedtime stories? I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, searching for air. I thought of all the women before me who had stood on the edge of their own storms, who somehow found the strength to keep going even when everything fell apart. I wish I could tell you I felt brave. The truth is, I was terrified. Terrified of failing my daughter, of losing our home, of facing judgment from friends and strangers. But I also knew this: I couldn't let Hazel see me break. Not now. Not when she needed me to be her anchor. So I took a shaky breath, wiped my tears, and stepped out into the rain. Each drop felt heavy, but with every step I reminded myself that storms can wash away what no longer serves us, and sometimes that's the first step to starting over. Maybe you've faced a moment like this too, a sudden storm, a door slammed shut, a future rewritten in an instant. If so, you're not alone. This is our story, yours and mine. It's about loss and heartbreak, yes, but it's also about hope, resilience, and the quiet strength we carry inside. Stay with me, because even when the clouds are at their darkest, there's a new beginning waiting on the other side. If you've ever had the ground shift beneath your feet, you know how quickly panic can set in. I remember driving home that day, gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. The city outside felt foreign, every familiar street suddenly full of silent questions. My mind spun in 1,000 directions, calculating rent, groceries, daycare, and how long we could make it on what was left in our checking account. The truth was brutal. $350 wouldn't get us far in Seattle. That kind of math has a way of stripping away hope, turning even small comforts into distant dreams. At home, I watched Hazel line up her favorite animal figurines on the carpet, completely unaware that the ground beneath our lives had cracked wide open. She asked if we could have pancakes for dinner, her celebration food, and I smiled, though my heart ached. That's the thing about being a parent. Even when your world is falling apart, you find ways to make life feel safe and bright for your child. I made pancakes with extra sprinkles, and as she ate, I promised myself I'd find a way forward no matter what. That night, I sat at our small kitchen table, bills spread out like puzzle pieces I didn't know how to fit together. I scrolled through forums and support groups for single moms searching for advice, or even just a scrap of reassurance. One post caught my eye: a mother in Chicago left in nearly the same way who'd rebuilt her life piece by piece, starting with less than I had. Her words stuck with me. You don't need a map for the whole journey, just the courage to take one step. I copied that line on a sticky note and pressed it to the fridge where I'd see it every morning. That night taught me something I wish someone had told me sooner. Survival isn't about being fearless. It's about facing fear and moving anyway. I started listing our immediate needs: food, rent, utilities, safety for Hazel, and pushed everything else aside. I researched food banks in our area, programs for single parents, and even emailed an old colleague about part-time work. Each step felt small, almost insignificant, but together they built a fragile bridge across the chasm in front of us. I realized I didn't have to solve everything at once. I just had to keep moving forward. As the rain eased that night, I stood at the window watching drops slip down the glass, their path uncertain but unstoppable. In moments like these, we discover how much strength we really have, not because we choose it, but because there's no other way. That's the first lesson hardship teaches. Sometimes survival means breaking things down to the simplest needs. One day, one meal, one bedtime story at a time. And as dawn crept in, I felt something quietly shift. Tomorrow would come ready or not, and I was determined to meet it head-on for Hazel and for myself. Looking back, it's easy to spot the warning signs that something wasn't right. But in the middle of everyday life, love can make you turn a blind eye to things you'd notice in anyone else's story. There were little things at first, a late night here, a forgotten anniversary there. Ryan started coming home later, always with the same tired excuse. Work's been crazy. I remember how he guarded his phone, setting it face down at dinner. Passwords changed without explanation. I brushed it off, telling myself everyone gets busy sometimes. Denial, I've learned, can feel like comfort until it crumbles. There were other clues too. One afternoon I found a receipt in his jacket pocket for a fancy restaurant, one we'd never visited together. When I asked, Ryan smiled and said it was a work lunch, nothing more. Part of me believed him. Part of me was too exhausted by motherhood and deadlines to press further. Friends tried to warn me. My closest friend Cassie asked gently if everything was all right, hinting at her concerns. I laughed it off, embarrassed to admit I felt unsure in my own marriage. Sometimes pride keeps you from facing what your heart already knows. I wish I could say this only happens in movies, but I've since learned it's all too common. I read stories from women who miss the same red flags: unexplained credit card charges, hidden social media accounts, last-minute business trips that never quite add up. It's a particular kind of heartbreak, realizing you ignored your instincts to keep the peace. We're taught to trust to build bridges, not burn them. But ignoring patterns of secrecy or disrespect doesn't save a relationship. It only delays the pain that's waiting at the other end. The hardest part was reconciling the Ryan I knew, the man who wrote me love notes in college, who held Hazel with awe the day she was born, with the man who quietly built a new life behind my back. There's a deep, stinging grief that comes from being deceived by someone you chose every day to trust. The lesson I carry now is, this love should feel like safety, not confusion. If your gut is whispering, listen. Trust is built in small daily moments of honesty. When those disappear, the foundation starts to crack, whether you see it or not. By the time Ryan left, all the little cracks had finally split wide open. I spent a long night replaying memories, searching for answers. But what helped most wasn't finding where I'd gone wrong. It was learning that I wasn't alone and that I could forgive myself for believing in us. The next morning, I woke with a clearer heart. There was no more room for doubt or self-blame. My only job now was to move forward to protect Hazel and to rebuild. And as the sun pushed through the clouds, I promised myself I would. There's a special kind of pain that comes when the people who should support you become part of the problem. The morning after Ryan left, the first call I got wasn't from a friend or my own family, but from Patricia, my mother-in-law. Her voice, usually sharp but cordial, was colder than ever. "Lauren, I heard what happened. Ryan's devastated. Why are you pushing him away?" Her words stung, twisting reality until it felt like I was the one to blame. I tried to explain, my voice shaking, but Patricia cut me off, convinced I had somehow driven her son to leave. It didn't stop there. Over the next few days, little messages and social media comments trickled in from Ryan's side of the family. Some were subtle. "Thinking of you. Ryan, stay strong," while others were blunt, accusing me of turning Hazel against her father. I saw relatives unfollow me, their silence louder than any argument. In moments like these, it's tempting to fight back, to defend your side to every cousin or aunt. But I learned quickly that not everyone wants the truth. Sometimes they're only interested in the story that makes them feel comfortable. This isn't unique to me. I read about other women whose in-laws closed ranks after a split, choosing loyalty to blood over empathy or fairness. One woman shared how her ex-mother-in-law showed up at her workplace demanding answers. Another was sent a letter full of blame and backhanded advice. It's a quiet, isolating sort of warfare where every gesture and word feels loaded. The loneliness deepens when those you hoped might stand beside you instead become an audience to your heartbreak, or worse, an active participant. Looking back, I realize how easy it is to internalize their accusations, to wonder if maybe you were too demanding, too distant, too much, or not enough. That's the trap of guilt. But with time, I learned to set boundaries. I stopped explaining myself to people who didn't want to understand and focused on those who truly listened. My real friends, my sister, even Hazel's preschool teacher, they became my safe harbor, reminding me I wasn't defined by other people's stories. Sometimes protecting your peace means letting go of the need to be understood by everyone. By the end of that week, the sting of Patricia's words had faded just enough for me to see clearly. I couldn't control the narrative others chose to believe, but I could control how I responded. I could choose compassion for myself, patience for Hazel, and space from those who drained my energy. The world felt smaller, but also more honest. With this clarity, I began to gather my strength for the next step, finding practical help and facing what came next, no matter who stood beside me or against me. In the days that followed, I learned that some people vanish just when you need them most. Friends who once filled my kitchen with laughter suddenly stopped returning texts. A neighbor who used to wave each morning crossed the street to avoid small talk. Maybe it was discomfort or fear of taking sides, but the silence stung. I tried reaching out, hoping for a little advice or comfort, but got only awkward platitudes. "You'll get through this," or "everything happens for a reason." It was as if my new reality, messy, uncertain, raw, made me invisible in the world I used to know. The practical challenges were just as daunting. I spent hours on hold with government hotlines, trying to understand what support a single mother could actually receive. The forms were long, the questions endless, and the help when it finally came was minimal. Food banks offered some relief, but I worried about the bills piling up. I even picked up extra freelance work, staying up late after Hazel fell asleep sketching until my eyes ached. Each small victory, an accepted project, a discount on rent, felt hard-won and barely enough to keep us afloat. I remember one afternoon feeling desperate. I called a local mom support group I'd found online. The leader, a woman named Cheryl, listened quietly as I explained my situation. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last," she said gently. She shared stories of women who'd lost homes, jobs, and partners, yet slowly rebuilt their lives. There was comfort in her honesty. She didn't sugarcoat things, but reminded me that asking for help was a kind of strength. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you're not okay and let someone meet you there. Still, there were nights I felt completely alone. I questioned everything. Was I a burden? Was I failing Hazel? It's a trap many single parents fall into, blaming themselves for circumstances beyond their control. But over time, I realized that my worth wasn't measured by what I'd lost or what others thought. Each day I kept going, filling Hazel's world with love. Seeking help, refusing to give up, was proof that I was enough. The lesson is simple, but not easy. You have to be gentle with yourself, especially when the world isn't. As summer edged closer, I let go of old expectations. Some friends never returned, but new faces, other moms at the food pantry, a kind librarian, the support group, filled the empty spaces. The system wasn't perfect, and neither was I, but every imperfect step forward mattered. With each new day, I grew a little stronger, and Hazel's laughter reminded me why I fought so hard. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I was learning slowly that even in the loneliest seasons, hope has a way of finding its way back in. One evening, long after Hazel had drifted off to sleep, I sat in the quiet apartment searching for answers. Desperation nudged me toward old emails and files, looking for anything Ryan might have left behind. That's when I stumbled onto a trail I hadn't expected: password reminders, hidden folders, and a series of strange transactions linked to an unfamiliar bank. My heart raced as I pieced together what Ryan had been planning for months. He hadn't just left, he'd carefully prepared for his exit, moving money and changing jobs in secret, all while telling me everything was fine. Realizing the depth of his deception was both shattering and clarifying. I remembered stories from my support group, women who'd found secret accounts, hidden leases, or suspicious messages that painted a new painful picture of their marriages. It felt like reliving my heartbreak all over again, but now with sharper eyes. I copied every file, every email, every shred of evidence I could find. It wasn't just about anger or justice anymore. It was about protecting Hazel's future and making sure Ryan couldn't take any more from us than he already had. Small victories began to emerge from the chaos. I found a message Ryan had sent to his mother, Patricia, weeks before leaving, thanking her for helping him open an overseas account. It was proof concrete and undeniable of the lengths he'd gone to hide money from us. The relief was mixed with sorrow. It hurt to know that people I'd once called family could work against Hazel and me. But each new discovery brought clarity, stripping away the last illusions and giving me the strength to act with certainty, not just emotion. With evidence in hand, I contacted Maggie, a local attorney recommended by Cheryl from the support group. She listened carefully as I laid out what I'd found, never once making me feel foolish or weak. "You're doing everything right," she reassured me. Maggie explained that many women never discover these kinds of secrets, and that my persistence could make all the difference in court. Her encouragement was more than legal advice. It was a reminder that my effort, however tiring, was worth it. Sometimes the small steps, gathering proof, asking hard questions, are what save you in the end. As I filed each new document, I felt a little of my old self return. The fear wasn't gone, but now it was balanced by a quiet determination. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back, building a case for Hazel and for myself. In those moments, I learned a lesson I hope others never forget. Even when you're exhausted and unsure, trusting your instincts and following the truth can lead to real, tangible hope. And with every answer uncovered, I felt more ready to face whatever came next, knowing I wasn't as powerless as I once believed. With Maggie's guidance, I began to piece together a plan. The next step was daunting, confronting the people who had information I needed, even if it meant risking rejection. I started with Violet, a woman I'd met only once, Ryan's new partner. Against every instinct, I reached out, unsure if she would help or simply ignore me. To my surprise, Violet answered my message. She was tired, frustrated, and unexpectedly kind. She'd been promised things by Ryan too, only to discover his pattern of secrets. Sharing her side of the story, she confirmed much of what I'd uncovered and offered evidence that filled in important gaps. It wasn't easy to accept help from someone so entangled in my pain. Yet talking to Violet revealed a hard truth. Sometimes allies come from the unlikeliest places. We bonded not as rivals, but as two women hurt by the same man's deceit. Her honesty made my next moves easier, and she provided emails and receipts that Maggie could use to build our case. I realized letting go of resentment, at least enough to work together, wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a step toward reclaiming control over my own story and protecting Hazel. Every day brought new choices that stretched my comfort zone. I found myself navigating meetings with attorneys, making statements at the bank, and fielding awkward questions from acquaintances. There were moments I wanted to retreat, to curl up and wish the world away. But each time I reminded myself of Cheryl's words, asking for help is a kind of strength. One evening, when Hazel asked if things would ever feel normal again, I told her the truth. "We're building a new kind of normal," I said, hugging her tight. "And it's okay if it takes time." I started to see the value in a wider network. Besides Maggie and Violet, the support group moms, the kind neighbor who offered to watch Hazel during appointments, even the local librarian who recommended books about resilience, each became a small lifeline. I learned that rebuilding isn't a solo act. In every city, someone has walked this road before, willing to share what they know. Reaching out felt scary at first, but with each conversation, the weight lessened. The more I opened up, the more unexpected kindness found its way to us. The hardest lesson was learning to accept help without feeling guilty or weak. There's a myth, especially for women, that strength means carrying everything alone. In truth, strength is knowing when to share the load. By letting people in, by listening and trusting, I found the support I needed to move forward. As our case moved toward a courtroom battle, I knew I was no longer fighting alone. Together, we stood a chance. And with that hope, I braced myself for the next chapter, facing Ryan and the truth before a judge. The day we finally entered the courtroom, my hands shook with nerves I couldn't quite hide. I'd imagined this moment for weeks, Maggie beside me, evidence in a thick folder. Ryan sitting across the aisle with a practiced air of indifference. The judge's bench seemed impossibly high, the ceiling full of echoes, but I kept my eyes on Hazel's drawing tucked inside my purse, a reminder of who I was truly fighting for. As the hearing began, I was struck by how formal and final everything felt. Every word carefully recorded, every glance a quiet battle of its own. Maggie presented our case with steady resolve, each piece of evidence layered patiently: bank statements, emails, Violet's testimony. When Ryan's lawyer objected or tried to twist the story, Maggie calmly brought the conversation back to what mattered: Hazel's security and well-being. At times, Ryan's confidence wavered, especially when confronted with proof of his hidden accounts and Patricia's involvement. It was surreal to see the truth laid bare, like pulling a thread and watching an entire fabric unravel. Even then, I felt a flicker of empathy for the man I used to love, mixed with fierce relief that I'd chosen to fight. The hardest moments came during my testimony. I answered questions about our marriage, about Hazel's routines, and my finances, each detail a small stone in a long path. I remembered Cheryl's advice: tell your truth, not just what you think the court wants to hear. So I spoke honestly, even when it meant admitting to mistakes or moments of fear. The judge listened intently, her eyes kind but unyielding. It struck me that courts aren't just about winners and losers. They're about protecting what matters most, and sometimes about granting closure where there's been only chaos. Throughout the trial, I saw other families waiting in the hallways, women clutching paperwork, children coloring quietly, men checking phones with anxious glances. Each one had their own battles and heartbreaks. It reminded me that my story, though painful, was far from unique. The lesson I carried was that justice takes time and persistence, and it often means facing discomfort head-on. There's courage in speaking up even when your voice shakes. And there's value in showing up not just for yourself, but for every parent or child who may walk a similar path someday. When the judge finally announced her decision granting me primary custody of Hazel, ordering Ryan to pay support, and freezing his overseas assets, I felt a wave of exhaustion and gratitude. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was a new beginning. I hugged Maggie, tears spilling over, and thanked Violet quietly in the hallway. As we stepped into the bright afternoon, I realized that telling the truth, no matter how hard, had brought us through. And now, with the weight of uncertainty finally lifting, I was ready to begin the work of healing. The weeks after the courtroom battle brought a strange quiet relief, like stepping out of a storm into an unfamiliar calm. There were papers to sign, accounts to update, and new routines to establish. But for the first time in months, I could breathe without fear gripping my chest. Hazel and I started settling into our new version of normal. We made rituals out of small things: Friday night pizza, planting sunflowers in window boxes, and evening walks around the neighborhood. These routines became our anchors, giving us a sense of home that wasn't tied to what we'd lost, but to what we were creating together. Healing, I soon realized, is a slow and non-linear process. Some days Hazel bounced around the apartment, laughter spilling from room to room. Other nights she'd ask about her dad, or cry quietly in her sleep, missing the pieces of family life that no verdict could restore. I leaned on resources: Hazel's therapist, supportive friends, and books about children and change. One mom from my support group told me, every scar is proof you survived. It's okay to heal at your own pace. I wrote that down and read it on the hard days, trusting that progress doesn't always look like a straight line. I also learned to make space for my own grief and exhaustion. For so long I'd stayed strong for Hazel, bottling up worry and pain. It took practice to allow myself moments of weakness, to rest, to cry, to ask for help from friends or the support group. I discovered that healing as a parent means healing alongside your child, not hiding your struggles, but showing that it's okay to feel, to fall, and to get back up. Each day we moved forward, I tried to model resilience for Hazel, and she in turn reminded me how joy can return in unexpected ways. One practical change was rebuilding our finances step by small step. With Maggie's help, I opened new accounts and learned the importance of financial independence, something I wished I'd prioritized sooner. I found part-time design work that fit our new schedule and even started a modest savings jar labeled Adventure Fund. The little victories added up: paying a bill on time, accepting a freelance project, saying yes to a playdate. I began to see that recovery isn't just about regaining what you lost, but about growing into someone stronger, more aware, and more compassionate for yourself and others. By late autumn, the air crisp and sweet with possibility, Hazel and I found our own rhythm. We weren't the same as before, but we were okay, sometimes even happy. The lesson that settled deepest in my heart was this: you don't have to be unbreakable to build a good life. Scars don't make you less worthy, they're part of your story, proof that you kept going. And as I looked forward, I felt grateful for every person and lesson that helped us reach this point, knowing our next chapter was finally ours to write. As the seasons changed and light returned to our lives, I often found myself reflecting on how far we'd come. From the shock of betrayal to the lonely nights from fighting through courtrooms to finding new friends and allies, each chapter of our journey was marked by fear, resilience, and hope. Hazel and I learned to celebrate the smallest victories. A drawing taped to the fridge, laughter at bedtime, a quiet afternoon spent reading together. These moments stitched together became a patchwork of healing and new beginnings, reminding me that joy can bloom even after the hardest winter. Looking back, I see how every hardship brought a lesson. Losing trust in Ryan forced me to trust myself. When family turned away, I found the power to set boundaries and seek kindness elsewhere. In the emptiness left by old friendships, new support grew, sometimes in the most unexpected places. The practical steps, tracking every dollar, building routines, asking for help, were as important as the emotional ones. And through it all, Hazel taught me that it's okay to miss what we've lost, but even better to love what we are building together. I hope if you've watched or listened this far, you've found pieces of your own story in ours. Maybe you've faced storms you thought you couldn't survive. Maybe you've had to start over with less than you deserved. If so, know this: you are not alone, and there is always a way forward, even if you have to build it one small step at a time. Healing isn't a straight path, but every effort, every gentle choice, every tear, and every laugh brings you closer to the life you deserve. So let this story be a lantern for anyone walking through darkness. You are stronger than you know, worthy of support, and capable of beginning again, no matter how many times life asks you to. Share your truth, reach for help, and remember to honor your scars. They are proof of all the roads you've traveled and all the ways you've grown. I hope Hazel and I can remind you that love, especially the kind you show yourself, is the greatest foundation of all. If this journey spoke to you, please subscribe, like, or leave a comment below. Tell us your story, share your questions, or simply let us know you're out there. Every time you connect, you help build a community where no one has to heal alone. Thank you for walking with us, for believing in brighter days, and for being part of the hope we carry forward, one sunrise, one story, one heart at a time.